Sites of fear, trauma, and violence. This is the state of South African schools. Last year alone, there were 28 murders at school. 28! Nearly half of them were what is called learner-on-learner violence. Kids basically killing each other. Now, our kids aren't just murdering each other. There's also the awful frequency of rapes. 2/3 are committed by children on other children. And I haven't even touched on the more common type of violence, bullying, in real life or even online. Well, this week, the Department of Basic Education and the police launched what they're calling the Collaborative Implementation Protocol on School Safety to try and tackle this crisis head on. Joining us is the Minister of Basic Education, Siviwe Gwarube. Thank you for your time, Minister, as always. Sites of fear, trauma and violence, these are words I pulled, I think, from one of your speeches. What on earth is going on in our schools?
Good morning, Bongani, and good morning to your listeners. Bongani, I mean, it got to a point where I think we could only, express and condemn incidents of violence for so long, and we could only, I think, for me at least as a minister, I could only go and express condolences to parents for so long. And that's why at the end of last year, I approached Minister Mkhunu to say, we need help, because if I look at the statistics of what is happening in our schools, I'm deeply concerned. And as you read out some of the stats, some of it is learner-on-learner violence. Sometimes it is also adults in the form of teachers or staff at the school. And so really, Bongani, our schools are starting to reflect the kind of communities that they exist in. And so this is why we've had to relook at the protocol that the department had with SAPS. We thought it was too generic, and we wanted to specifically use crime stats to identify exactly where the hotspots are. And now we know 283 schools are sitting in the middle of what the SAPS call hotspots. That allows us to have a more targeted approach to those schools, without obviously the over-militarization of school for other learners.
Well, that's something I was going to come to, but I mean, it seems like the knee-jerk response. I mean, let's just get into some of those numbers, Minister. 28 murders in a single year. Can you give us a sense of what's behind those numbers? How did these murders happen?
Look, Bongani, it's a myriad of things, and a lot of it is also related to gang violence in our schools. A lot of it is also related to sort of gang wars playing themselves out. I mean, we've had incidents of bullying that have gone, so severely that a child would come to school with a parent's gun, and I mean, these are the kind of things that we are seeing, and of course, and that's why, as I was explaining to somebody, that this protocol can't work if it's only the police and it's only DBE that are working together. Yeah. We have to involve parents. We have to involve the community, because ultimately discipline begins at home. Because also, Bongani, I have a constitutional obligation to protect not only just the learners, but also the educators who work in our schools.
Yeah.
And some of them are reporting that they are being terrorized by learners who go there with knives and pangas, and as I say, the one learner who arrived at the school with the parent's gun. And so it's a careful balancing act, but at the same time we have to be harsh on people who are meting out violence in our schools, because it's not fair for the other learners and it's not fair for our teachers.
The frequency of rapes, as I mentioned in my introduction, I mean, if 2/3 are committed by learners on learners, that means what? You're more likely to be raped by another learner at school?
And part of the protocol is to say, and again, this is now what we're saying for teachers, that one, there has to be a patrolling of toilets in schools. So, a lot of these incidents are happening in toilets during school hours. I'm sure you would remember this horrific incident of a child in Belfast that was sexually, a 7-year-old that was sexually assaulted by a 15-year-old. And now, Bongani, you see, this is why we've had to have a wide-ranging approach on this issue, because we've now got to patrol toilets. We've got to make sure that the teachers, we are looking at toilets, because that's where most, if not all, of these crimes are happening. But also, at the same time, where the Minister of Justice and I are working together, is to make sure that every time an appointment is made at a school, whether it is a staff member or a teacher, that those people are vetted against the two registers, the Child Protection Register and also the Sexual Offences Register, because we also can't be liable for bringing in people who are sex pests in the schools to begin with.
Gosh, all right, you've mentioned patrols, you've mentioned pre-screening for people who come to these schools. I mean, does that mean we're going to have officers patrolling schools, patrolling children when they're going to the bathroom? Are those officers themselves vetted against those two registers, for example? And again, isn't this diverting those resources from elsewhere? I mean, I don't know what the solution here is.
Yeah. So no, when I'm talking about patrolling, we are saying that's why we're wanting to the actual teachers. Now it means that we have to make sure that teachers are patrolling specifically, that there's a specific roster of during break times and school times, that there are no crime blind spots. The police, their role in schools would be obviously the visible policing, particularly during the morning rush and also after school rush, because that's when learners are also becoming victims to crime from the community. So, and then of course, there would be, if there is now a reasonable suspicion that somebody has these dangerous weapons in schools, and according to the law, the police can be called in for a random search and seizure. So those are the two elements where we are saying the police must come closer to the schools. But ultimately, it is the staff within the schools who need to be made aware of the fact that bathrooms have become a big source of unsafety for a lot of learners. And then, of course, the vetting is really about us and justice, making sure that whoever is coming in contact with learners has been vetted. And we know that we have a backlog because the process has been so sluggish that we've got teachers who are in the system, some of whom have not been checked against the register. And I was saying to members of parliament that it is my commitment that we're going to aggressively deal with that backlog.
Minister, sometimes we as the public don't know what to believe. And I'll give you the case that was well publicized. This 7-year-old girl, Gwe, the allegation was she'd been assaulted, raped at school. We now know from the NPA, at least they're saying there's no conclusive evidence. The principal of that school says his reputation was ruined. Communities everywhere are furious because what actually happened, if anything at all. I mean, what role does your department play in that kind of situation, particularly in under-resourced areas? Because how the story came to light was because the mother took to social media. Otherwise, we would never have known.
Yeah. Look, I mean, and this is why I think the close collaboration and as you said, are those safety committees, even the answer. And what I wanted to say is that this is why it's so important to have the voice of parents, the voice of communities, and the police, and around the same room. Because Minister Mkhunu made the example yesterday during the press conference that sometimes we would go to a school and the principal would say, if something, or I'm suspecting danger in the school or something has happened, sometimes I don't know who to call. Or sometimes I try and call the local police station, but the phones don't work. So, when we are...
Or they don't have a car.
Yeah, and so when we are dealing with these things, that's why I want us to work together as a government so that we can, one, move with pace. So one, on the justice point of view, the vetting must be done. But also, Minister Mkhulu is now aware that the police stations and the station commanders in these 283 schools have to be on speed dial because these are people who are in danger. And then, of course, on the issue of sexual violence, and it is one that is incredibly sensitive, Bongani, and I want to be led by the NPA here to say that, look, I mean, there are these facts around this particular case. But for us, it was important that, one, we support the learner and their parents with psychosocial support, but also to make sure that that child, regardless of what the outcome of the investigation is, that child has to be supported because clearly that child was hurt. Regardless of where it happened, with who, the reality is that child has been harmed. And so that has been really our role in supporting them and the child.
I remember you launching the Safe Schools app. I think it was with one of the networks in December last year. Has that made a difference? Can that kind of thing work in collaboration with this new protocol?
So the Safe Schools app is really helping us with identifying infrastructure challenges. And in a way, yes, you are right. It can really point us to some of the more egregious things like fences that are falling apart, and these kind of things. But what we really wanted is to say to community members, please flag with us where there are infrastructure issues, where there's no fences, where windows are falling apart. Not to say that it just negates now the responsibility of the principals and the SGBs to flagging with these things with the province. But we also want parents and community members to understand that schools are their asset too.
All right. Appreciate your time. Minister of Basic Education, Siviwe Gwarube there. Every parent sends their child to school hoping they'll learn something. Gosh, the last thing you think of is your little one coming back in a body bag.
Current events, developing stories,
tough questions,
your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.